Welcome to the Talking Mind podcast.
Come join us as we chat about a whole host of mindset-related issues, giving you both the male and female perspective. Don't miss out on the exciting interviews we'll be conducting with some truly inspirational guests. My name's Marcus Matthews, and I'm a rapid transformational therapist whose quest is to transform people's minds to reach their own personal greatness.
My name is Tracy Carroll. I am a rapid transformational therapy practitioner, and my mission is to end the stigma surrounding mental health issues and show people they no longer need to suffer in silence.
Get going and let the podcast begin.
Welcome everybody to the Talking Mind podcast. There is no Tracy with us today. She's got some personal stuff that's going on, and I want to send her big loves. She'll know what it's about. So, but she would have loved to have been on this today because I've got with me Lucy Patel, who is a registered nutritionist and health coach. And thank God I got that out without spitting my teeth out. Because I think it's really important. We talked about this just before the podcast, didn't we, about making sure that people know that you are qualified, in quotes, to talk about what we're going to talk about. So I connected with Lucy through a group that we're both in called Cheshire Socialites, and I am on my own kind of nutrition and health journey. I guess, as I say it, the inside of the shop is gleaming with gold, the outside's looking a little bit knackered and fatty. So I've started this journey because I know that our gut is our second brain. So I'm really, really happy that you're here today, and we can have a chat and inform people, educate people on the benefits of good nutrition. So welcome, and thank you for being
very
here.
much, Marcus.
The floor is yours. Please tell everybody a little bit about who Lucy Patel is, how you became a nutritionist, kind of a little bit about your journey, and what it is that you do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me on the podcast, Marcus. Really appreciate it. So my journey into nutrition probably started when I was about 25. When I looked into doing a nutrition course. I was obviously relatively fresh out of uni, had lots of debts, etc. And all the courses were sort of like full-time, going back to school, and I basically couldn't afford it. And I parked it indefinitely at the time. I thought that would have been nice, but hey, there we go. Fast forward 8 years. I became a qualified project manager, worked in financial services, and it was actually my husband going self-employed that really gave me the kick to go, look, if I don't do this now, I am never going to do it. I thought, if you're doing it, then why not give it a go? So I then enrolled with the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, which is the leading nutrition school in Europe, and did a 3-year degree with them, qualifying in August this year, and I've now launched my business. So it's been a very busy year. I was also on maternity leave for my final year, so I was juggling the baby and also doing my final year exams. So it's been a pretty hectic year with COVID as well. So lockdown baby. So I mean, I've launched my business, and my real focus is kind of helping busy mums, you know, in their kind of 30s and 40s. They've had their children, and I'm finding that there is such a lack of support out there. You know, we get supported when we're pregnant, and we get supported through those sort of early weeks and months, and then it's almost like you're just left to it. And obviously, with all the stresses and strains that come with raising a family, there's also pressures to lose weight, go back to your job, be very successful at your job, raise wonderful children who are perfectly behaved and cook amazing food for everyone 3 times a day. It's just this list of stuff. And all I'm hearing, so I've got a lot of friends who are in a similar position, and all the words and the kind of fears that I'm seeing is just this sense of overwhelm, just constant overwhelm with everything that a mum in this day and age has to contend with. Social media obviously plays into that. I mean, that might be a slightly separate topic, but there's so much we're in an era now where we're able to compare ourselves to everybody 24 hours a day. 30 years ago, you didn't have a Scooby-Doo what any other mum was doing. You were in blissful ignorance that whatever you were doing was probably fine. Now you see what everyone is doing, and you see this sheen of, oh, well, they're all feeding their kids better food, or they're doing more activities with their children, or whatever it might be. So I think mums in this generation are in a very, very challenging position, and having to deal with a lot. And they are the people that I want to help now that I'm qualified nutritionist.
You know what? I think generally, I think you're right. And I think for me, as a man looking in on this, I think a lot of our roles, men and women, and anybody who's outside of that catchment area, there seems to be now tribes that are building. So if you're a mum or you're a woman, this is how you need to show up. You need to this mumtrepreneur, that you need to look amazing, you need to have this, you need to have that. And then over here as a man, that traditional hunter-gatherer, feeder, protector role has now gone. And all of that stuff, does affect people's bodies and their minds. But I just want to take you back a little bit, because one of the things that I'm really interested in, because you said about your degree was a lot more corporate, I guess. So what was the mindset change in you that went, actually, that's not where my passion is, and actually I want to do this? Because I'm taking your degree is different to what you're kind of doing now, which is the same with a lot of people, but I'm really interested in you and what that journey was like, and why you felt that this was what you needed to do.
Yeah, I mean, my original degree was in psychology, but the one I did when I was 18. And then obviously fast forward to the ripe old age of 32 was when I started studying nutrition. I mean, in terms of, there's levels of job satisfaction, I guess. I mean, I really enjoyed my time as a project manager. I met some wonderful people. I worked for a great company, but I wasn't helping people. There's no way I wasn't helping people in the way that I wanted. And now being a nutritionist and a health coach, I mean, I'm a few weeks in and already I'm seeing just such, the job satisfaction is incredible. Once you help people tap into and help educate people on what they need to do. And going back to the health coaching role, a huge part of this, which is something I think we talked about when we first spoke, which I think is where the diet industry falls down, is leaving people in a position that they can continue being healthy after they've stopped working with me. I've not done my job if someone follows a plan and eats all the right food while on a program, and then at the end they're like, I don't know how to carry this on. I don't know how to take this into the real world and turn it into a lifestyle change. So the health coaching is absolutely a core part of that whole process, helping people feel empowered to go, I know what I'm doing now. I know what to do, and I can carry on.
It's so true. And I think that's one of the things that I think if anybody's listening to this podcast, whether, you're looking at nutrition, whether you're looking at counseling, whether you're looking at therapy, whether you're looking at coaching, doesn't matter what it is that really my passion is very similar. And that's why we connected, wasn't it? Is that there are so many people out there, whether it be companies, for example, I don't want to give them a shout out, Noom, touted as this thing. And because obviously I've got that kind of therapy background, like yourself, the psychology, the mindset, I get what they're doing as a product. But actually, it's very easy to be paying a subscription for that and it just rolling on, and you don't get anything. I think that when you work with somebody, that accountability is so important, that you've got somebody that is there that's going to keep you accountable, but also is going to make you feel empowered, that you're not going to a nutrition session, having those conversations, and then you've got nothing tangible to take away, because then you're not owning it, are you?
Exactly.
I've got a question I want to ask. At the moment, what would you say, besides those things that you've already kind of highlighted, in regards to being busy parents, or especially mums, what are the biggest challenges you're finding in regards to the nutrition and health side of it? You know, what are those excuses that people are coming up with that you have to overcome?
I think there's two that I think are coming up more often, more like most. I think one of them is time. One of them is just not having the time to be able to plan ahead, buy, cook, plan meals, you know, every single day, you know, getting all you know, fruit and veg in 5 portions a day, etc. Which I think is a very valid, it's a very valid struggle for a busy mum with a job and, you know, multiple children with pickups and all the rest of it. The other one is, I'm finding that it's quite, I won't say it's upsetting, but a lot of clients, they know what healthy looks like. They know what it is they need to be doing. But there's a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of clients who'll come and say, I've been eating XYZ product. It says it's low fat, or it said it's low calorie, but I don't know, they might have been struggling with their weight, for example, and they just don't understand what's going on. They're like, I'm eating like low calorie everything, and yet I'm really struggling to maintain my weight, and it's creeping up. And there's this sort of like edge of despair, really, that like they're trying, they feel like they're doing the right things in terms of, well, what, you know, diet industry might say is the right thing to do in terms of, you know, a cereal bar that's 85 calories or whatever it might be. But there's so much
85 calories of crap.
There's a lot of will there. There's a lot of desire to eat well, and there's just a lot of confusion around what they should be eating, how much they should be eating, when they should be eating, and then all the behavioral side that plays into that. So, you know, the sort of all the intuitive and mindful eating side is so prevalent in terms of people just, you know, misunderstanding hunger cues and, you know, boredom eating, stressed eating. We've all been there, right? No one's kind of immune to that. But for some people it is a problem, and it's quite a hard cycle to break. So part of, you know, a lot of the strategies that we'll develop is starting to help people to just really start to just listen and just tap in a little bit more to their own hunger signals and trusting what their body's telling them. If you're hungry and you assess that is physical hunger, you need to eat, right? But, you know, energy and blood sugar balance is a huge one. You know, people are very carb heavy, especially with snacks and things. It's very easy to reach for, you know, again, healthy cereal bars, but when you actually look at what's in them, it's kind of, you know, carbs.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? I'm really interested in this. So many years ago, I was on a cruise, and there was a guy in like the spa bit, and he worked for the Reebok Sports Institute, and he was really funny. He was about 5'4", but like had like the perfect like V-shaped body. I think he was a swimmer, if I remember right. And he introduced himself, and he said, "Hi, my name's whatever, and I am clinically obese." And everybody's like, "What? You're clinically obese?" And he talked a lot about BMI, and my understanding with BMI and all that sort of stuff is that it was actually invented by the military to assess how much basic training people needed to go through in World War II. And I just wonder, a lot of these myths around, you know, what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, you know, things like margarines, we know it's like 1 chromosome off plastic. So how does tradition play a part in that? Because the way in which families used to be in maybe the 70s and 80s, you know, mums might have jobs, but they were at home. We said this before, you know, the man was there with his spear going out hunting and was providing and protecting. And that whole balance has shifted, certainly over the last 20 years. So I wonder whether that feeds into a lot of the confusion about what can I eat, what shouldn't I eat, and it's product.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, how do you get around that and calm people down to, okay, it's okay, and educate them around that fear aspect of what should I be doing, because somebody says that and somebody says the other.
It's interesting if we just jump back to the BMI point. Now, I'll need to maybe just check this after. Now, the BMI sort of calculation was developed. It wasn't by anyone it wasn't like a medical professional. I think it was like an astronomer or something that's nothing to do with the human body, basically. And it was based purely on white males. So inherently we see a problem with BMI, that it's completely not, you can't then extrapolate that into the whole population. Now, it's a guide at best, but it doesn't take into account your muscle mass, which is probably what this guy was talking about. He was probably ripped, had lots of muscle, so he was heavy, because muscle is denser than fat. So if you're very muscly and short, you could come out as clinically obese, and therein lies the problem, that people get told.
So I am ripped, heavy, and that's why I'm so heavy. Then it's actually because I'm ripped. Okay, I'm going to take that.
There you go. It's not worrying. So I mean so BMI isn't really something that I prescribe to myself, but the NHS use it, so there we go. And then your point around, in terms of the confusion on what people should be eating. I mean, if we think back over the last, 40 years, we've gone through, I think there was a smoker's diet back in the 40s or 50s or something. And there's been cabbage soup diets. There was your Rosemary Connolly fat-free phase. There was the Atkins phase, which was around when I was a teenager. And some of my friends tried that, actually. They were doing the Atkins diet, which is the 0 carbs. So they were literally just eating but then they end up eating like processed meat and processed cheese. It's like, that's not healthy. Carbs are continually demonized. The narrative is now shifting very much away from fat making you fat, and that it's actually having too much refined carbohydrate, which, when it's not used, is turned into fat. And we've obviously got an obesity epidemic that is just, especially in the Western, in US, UK, I think 1 in 5 or 4 adults is obese. It's a problem. It's a genuine problem. But in terms of keeping up, you're right. If I look at my Instagram feed now, there will be mention of, there'll be keto, paleo, vegan, pegan, which is a mixture of vegan and paleo, although I'm not entirely sure how you do a vegan diet. Obviously vegetarian, there's all sorts of ways to eat. And the issue for me is that it's almost like, if people don't feel they can subscribe to this labeled way of eating, that there's no point even doing a few small things that could shift in that direction. So take going veggie, for example. It's almost like you're either a vegetarian or you're not a vegetarian. But what if you were a meat eater that started to go, I'm going to have 1 meat-free day a week, and then I'm going to have 2 meat-free days a week? That's great. That's a really good shift. If you're not eating enough veg, that's a really good place to start. You're not a vegetarian, but you're making changes that are moving you in a really positive direction. So we seem to be labeling different ways of eating, and there seems to be this sort of underlying competition around,
Yeah, and I think the other thing with that,
over here, and the veggie camp and the keto camp, and it's almost like everyone else's diet is rubbish because it's not our diet. And they're selling, a lot of these companies are selling stuff. They're selling,
and I was going to say, it's marketing. Because everything's vegan. Everything's vegan now. I buy a laptop in Currys. It's a vegan laptop. And the problem is that it diminishes. I'm not vegan, but we all know a plant-based diet is a good diet. But the problem is, a lot of these products that are being sold are overly processed. They are using, palm oils. They're being produced with stuff that maybe is being produced in areas where maybe rainforest is being deforested. So all these people are on their high horse going, I'm vegan now, but actually they don't know the source of where that product has come from. And one of the things from a psychology point of view that I think is really important, and I talk a lot about this, is that our mind is there to keep us alive. That's its only job. And it does that by connecting to things that are familiar, because it doesn't like the unfamiliar. So when you've got this marketing and you've got all this social media and you've got the person next door saying this and everybody's living a little bit of a fake life, we're all so confused. And we start to see guilt and shame, and then so we might be going, oh yeah, I'm on my nutrition, and then going over and having the Kit Kat. So how much of that do you find, because guilt and shame is a big part, isn't it, of that process? And I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit, about the guilt and shame that people may
I mean, what you said is right. I mean, anything you see on Instagram is probably 5% of what's actually going on with that person or thing. Any diet that's reporting amazing results will have just as many people who have not complied. They didn't enjoy it, it wasn't successful, etc. And if you look at long-term success on kind of very restrictive diets, and if you look at like Slimming World and all that kind of stuff, long-term success is very, very poor. There's quick results in the beginning, and then that's what gets reported and go, look, so and so lost all this weight, and then and like you said, people say, oh, my next door neighbor did this, and you have no idea what's really going on with them. So I think it just goes back to comparison. People just compare, and you automatically compare to the negative. You never look at someone else and go, I've got something that they haven't, that makes me, I'm grateful for something that I have that they don't. You always look at someone and go, they've got something that I haven't. So there is always that sort of underlying comparison, and why didn't it work for them if it didn't work for me? But you don't know what's been going on with this. So someone who successfully lost weight, for example, they might have absolutely hated it. You don't know where their, the kind of sacrifices they made to get there. But they'll tell you that, oh, look, I lost a stone in a month or whatever, and yay me. So I mean, in terms of shame, I mean, a lot of the messaging out there, and it's something that again, I think we talked about a little bit last time, is the whole, we're approaching Christmas in January, when all the messaging is about, you've had a good time at Christmas, now you need to lose that Christmas weight and reset and reinvent yourself for the new year. And it's like, why should we feel the pressure to change who we are just because it's January? It's insane. If January didn't fall, it wasn't the first month of a new year, there would not be that pressure. So my focus in terms of how I want to help support people through January is very much around going the complete opposite direction. It's like, give yourself a break. January is a rubbish month as it is. I think it's, I think Blue Monday is in January, which is there's a lot of kind of mental health, increase in mental health issues in January, because obviously, we've had the festive season, which is all wonderful. And then people go into January and suddenly feel under pressure to completely, turn their lives upside down and turn into a new person and lose weight and go to the gym 5 times a week. And it's just ridiculous. So I think a lot of what I, with my clients is just showing compassion. It's just showing that any change, however small, if you implement one small thing, but do it successfully, that is way more powerful than going all gung-ho with some crazy new lifestyle and diet for a month, and then after a few weeks you're like, I've absolutely had enough, this is not enjoyable, this is not sustainable, this is not something that I can carry on for another month, let alone a year or 5 years. The whole point of what I do is to move people into a routine that they can literally carry on indefinitely.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when I kind of started on this kind of path, my own journey, and because obviously I work with the mind, so that's where I started, because every habit is driven by a thought. And one of the things I talk a lot about to my clients, and this came from my choice, is the word choice. And I will go to the cupboard, and I have my 85% dark chocolate if I want a snack. It's very nice, green and blacks. If you're out there, I'm happy for free advertising. But what I was going to say is that the Kit Kat's there, the crisps are there, the whatever's there. And what I found was really empowering was not to deny myself that, but to say, oh, wait a minute, I absolutely can have that because I'm an adult, and nobody is telling me that I can't have that Kit Kat. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a choice. Do I want to stay where I am, or do I want to shift? Do I want to have that, but have it without any guilt or shame, and go, no, I'm an adult, I can have that, and I'm taking the responsibility for putting that sugar, for putting that stuff in my body. You know, when I do that now, I'll be honest, if I have anything that's too much sugary, because I've kind of done a lot of detoxing, I feel as I've poisoned myself, but I still do it, and I don't do it with guilt or shame. And I think that's really important, and to have that choice. I work a lot with smokers, and one of the things that I say is, when you want a cigarette, have a glass of water, go, I can have a cigarette, absolutely, and it's my choice. And I always say to my clients, I'm not your mom or dad, I'm not your teacher, I'm just here to help you, and I'm giving you the choices and the options. And so what I say is, have a glass of water, and I want you to remember, while you're having that glass of water, or take a deep breath in, that as you take that breath in, as you have that glass of water, be really proud that you made that choice. Because what happens is that same kick of serotonin and oxytocin in your body that you're getting from taking that sugary food stuff in still happens. And the more you create that, just that simple habit of going, okay, I know at 10 o'clock I go and have that Mars bar, I'm going to have a glass of water, I'm going to choose healthy, but I'm not going to do it and deny myself the other thing if I want it, but I'm making a choice. And I think that's quite empowering, to give people that option to go, if you want the cake, have the cake, but be happy having the cake, and be responsible for making that choice.
And
I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
You know, enjoy it and move on, and don't think another second about it. You know, without this whole, and I think if we're staying on the kind of topic of shame, a lot of the kind of really subtle terminology and words that you see being used out there. So you'll hear people talk about cheat days and making up for something or another. And it's this whole kind of idea that if we have something that's not deemed healthy, that we have to in some way pay it back, or use the word cheat, or, you know, all this negative language about it, which is just then going to associate fear with whatever it is. Like you said, you know, we have the choice, we could choose to have the cake, but if they're going to go, you know, there's all these then emotions that come with that, that's not good. Then that's, you know, it's just completely unfair. And, you know, you hear a lot of people talk about, you know, if they have a bad day and then they're going to write off the rest of the week because, you know, they've had like a little slip up. And, you know, I have a few clients that say this. I'm like, look, one day out of a program of 96 days, that's what you're talking about. One day is not going to make any difference. If you have one day where, you know, everything just seems to be going against you and you've eaten rubbish, it happens, right? Especially when you're a busy mum, it happens a lot. Move on from it, learn from it, learn what triggers, you know, what were the triggers that really drove that, and then that is what we would then work on. Say, right, what were the certain situations that made you go, oh my god, I just need X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then it builds, and then over time the habits just get better and better, having something else there to grab rather than a chocolate bar, for example. But it's just, like I said, it's those small but powerful habits, and just really, really kind of ingraining those into, you know, the routine, and that sort of, it's sort of like it's just changing, like you said, it's changing that behavior. It's changing that behavioral reaction to a situation to go, I'm not going to reach for a handful of Maltesers or whatever. I'm going to just, like you said, stop, take a breath, observe the situation, and then proceed. Just giving yourself that 5 seconds to just go, right, do I really want that, or am I just going to immediately regret it?
Yeah, and I think you use the word fear, and I think, I mean, we spoke about this, and as you know, my big topic at the moment is kind of vulnerability. And I think that when you sit in that fear, and when you sit in that space where you're going, I'm not good enough, I'm not, you know, I can't do this, I'm different, it's not available to me, all of that kind of self-talk, when you can just sit in that fear and be vulnerable enough to go, do you know what, I'm just having a bad day. It's fine. I'm having a bad day, and recognize it, honor that feeling, and then be courageous enough to just say, I'm having a bad day. And this doesn't define who I am. Anybody's opinion on this really doesn't matter. You know, it's my opinion of myself. And I want to tap into this, because one of the things that I've discovered and we talked about this prior to the podcast, is about that fear and the way in which the mind and body produces kind of the chemicals like our cortisol. You know, I mentioned before about serotonin and oxytocin, those happy chemicals that when we do eat bad food, which are triggered. I think Pringles is the great one, isn't it? You know, once you stop, you probably can't stop. Yeah, that's because it's got a chemical in there that triggers part of your brain that goes, woohoo, this is great. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because on my own journey, one of the things that I do know is that fear and that cortisol takes us into survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, the body will react in one or two ways. And it's interesting that I can't remember, I was listening to who was talking about this. They said when an antelope is being chased by a lion, so the food source is being chased by the lion, it's interesting that when you watch them once they've had the chase and they haven't been killed, that the antelope will often shake and then it will defecate. And one of the reasons for that is that mind-gut connection, and it shakes it off and then it's fine. And I think obviously we're not going to do that ourselves, but when we go through fear, when we go through all of these thoughts of I'm not good enough, I can't do this, and we're storing all that cortisol, you know, I know there is scientific evidence now that cortisol and that survival hormone does play a massive part about, you know, putting on weight. And I just wondered, especially with mums, you know, you've maybe, especially if it's your first child, you want to be the best mum and you want to do this and you want to protect, and naturally you will go into survival mode, not just for yourself but for your child, because you want to be the best for them. And we put so much pressure on ourselves as parents, and I think we find often dads and mums, as we become parents and we're busy and we're looking after them, we neglect ourselves, we neglect our bodies, and it's like a drip feed. And the next minute we're kind of stood there going, where did that come from?
What happened?
Yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit about that, especially with your, you know, your clients being those type of people, and around those conversations about you've got to fill up your own cup. You know, they say on an airplane, don't they? You've got to put your oxygen mask on before the child. So I'd be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly jumping back to stress, because obviously stress carries all sorts of kind of negative connotations these days. That, you know, the stress response is an absolutely mandatory evolutionary process. Harking back to the example that we always were taught was, you know, caveman being chased by lion. That's the survival technique. It's fight or flight. You either stay and fight or you run. Now, either way, all of your basically all of your blood and energy starts to get pumped towards your arms and legs, so you can run away or fight, you know, depending on which response. Now, the problem with where we are today is that we obviously don't have many physical threats of that nature, hopefully, but we're almost always operating at this sort of low-grade chronic stress. You know, there's so many things that are stressing everyone out on a day-to-day basis, you know, whether it's social media or work or children, or, you know, just the pace of life now is just insane. So that stress response has become a bit maladaptive because it's not really serving us anymore, because people are, you know, the cortisol is pumping through because it's perceiving threats. But the threat it's perceiving is, you know, an angry email or someone not liking their social media or whatever it is that you might want to, you know, translate that to. So, and interestingly, what you said, you know, after that stress response then dies down, because, you know, digestion, you don't need to digest food when you're stressed. So that's why you can then end up with all sorts of digestive complaints when you're chronically stressed, because your blood is constantly being deviated to what your body thinks is going to help you in that situation. So muscles, arms, legs, brain, pupils dilate, blood vessels dilate, but your gut isn't needed. You don't need to digest food while you're running away. So that's why it can lead to it can manifest as all sorts of issues when someone is constantly on that sort of level, you know, constantly stressed. I mean, what you said about obviously when, you know, we then have children, and then there's a whole new realm of anxiety thrown into the mix then about, like you said, the safety of your child and, you know, are they sleeping, are they feeding, and all the rest of it. And you're right, the parents take a massive backseat particularly the mums. Now, you're right, the dads absolutely do play a role, but from that first year is very much, I'd say, well, my experience at least, the mum is very much the central role. And then that starts to balance out as the children get older. And that is ultimately why women, years after they've had children, and like you said, they almost, look at a photo from a few years and go, oh my God, who is that? That's not me. There's just that you lose a connection to the pre-baby you, the you that was just very I say selfish, but I don't actually mean that in a negative way. I mean that you only really have to worry about yourself and all the things that you valued and all the things that you did to sort of look after yourself and, all the things that made you happy. And you realize that they take a back seat, and it can be quite hard to then reincorporate those back into your life. And you realize it's been 5 years and you're like, you almost don't recognize yourself anymore. And I can definitely associate with that. And that's something that I'm like now actively trying to really carve out time for the things that I enjoy. And for me, it's literally something as simple as reading a book, just sitting down on my own, reading a book. I get such immense joy from. And it's something that I just wasn't doing it because I was just too exhausted or just didn't have any time. So I think the message that I'm really trying to get through is that I honestly firmly believe that mums can be as healthy, if not more healthy, after they've had children than they were before. I think it's completely possible, but it takes commitment. It's obviously a little bit harder to reach health goal, when you're kind of in your 30s and 40s. I don't know about you, but when you're in your 20s, you got away with all sorts. Your diet was rubbish and didn't really seem to have any impact. 30s, definitely notice a difference.
Yeah, but I think we need to flip this, because again, I go back to tradition. I think traditionally, because of those traditional roles, there was an expectation with women, and I think this goes back to I don't know if you know Deb Forsyth. She's she's the menopause consultant. And she talks a lot about traditionally, pre-menopause, after menopause, women died. Okay, so for millions of years, actually, once a woman had babies and that thing, traditionally they'd like go downhill, die, and move on. That sounds gross, but that's how it was. But that's not how life is nowadays. And I think we owe it to our children to show self-love and to show self-care and to show them, because actually as a parent, we're responsible for making sure the next generations are stronger, are healthier, both in their bodies and their minds. So if you think it's selfish that I've got to do this, I've got to look after the baby, I've got to do this, I've got to take them to school, there is all of that stuff, but there's 24 hours in a day. And if you can't take 30 minutes out, and I say this to my clients all the time, we schedule in stuff to do, but we don't schedule in things to not do.
Exactly.
And actually not doing is doing, because your body needs that time.
Just being and not doing something.
Yeah, and just if you want to use your technology, there's loads of stuff on your smartphones now, but put an alarm on to go, time out, and put people on notice and go, actually, these are the rules, and maybe have some rules within your house that says, on a Friday, we're going to have whatever we want to have to eat. But these are the things, and have a charter as a family, especially if you've got older kids. Get your kids involved, because they are educated now at school, aren't they? Nutrition's a big thing. Image is a big thing. My own son, he's presently up at cataract training with the Paras. And he went through what we call his chubby years. And he made I'm so proud of him, because he made this decision and just went, do you know what? I don't want to feel and look like this anymore. So he started training. And it's funny because he tells me off now, because I'll have the extra Yorkshire pudding on Sunday. And if he's home, he'll go, Dad, you're not supposed to have that. I'm choosing to have it. It's fine. But my point is that, if we want to have a healthier kids, we've got to start supporting them, but we've got to do that ourselves. And I think if you get everybody involved, you know,
we have to role model.
Yeah.
They, and especially now, my eldest is 3 and she is just picking up everything. She's picking up words, behaviors, and you're right, you have to be quite conscious of what sort of behavior that you're modeling back on them. And I have days where I feel like they're driving me up the wall, and just having 45 minutes away is absolutely transformational by the time I've come downstairs. Just having that time where you just need to just have a little breather and just go and do something else, probably laundry, to be honest, but there we go. And you're right, it's absolutely critical that we practice what we preach and model the behavior that we would never expect our children or want to see our children frazzled and stressed and running around with like millions of things to do. We want them to be, happy and rested and, getting joy out of life. And you're right, we don't model that back on ourselves enough.
And I think it's really important for people to understand that with your children between the age of 0, so when they're born, up to 8 years old, by that point, by the time they get to around about 8, they've already been programmed with 80% of who they are going to become in the future. So it's kind of from 8 to about 18 is another 10%, and then by the time you're 35, pretty much you've been programmed. And that's what I deal with a lot with people, and a lot of it is to do with that inner child and those beliefs and those feelings. So we need to be mindful that in those busiest of times, because that is the busy period, isn't it, when we're looking after them. Once they get to secondary school, it can be a little bit easier, they're a little bit freer, but we need to be really conscious that they're absorbing, they dream, don't they, between the age of 0 and 8, they want to be anything and everything, but they will model our behaviors, and that all happens subconsciously. So it's really important that we don't stress ourselves out, because I don't want to put another layer of anxiety onto people and go, now it's all in your subconscious mind. That's what I work in. One of the things I want to just tip on now, and this, we mentioned this before, but when you look at things like organic, and when you look at this, and this is the best thing to buy and all the rest of it, there's a lot of people out there who are preaching the way you should eat and what you should do. And then when you look at them, they're like single, they're rich. And a lot of people are going to go to, Asda, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Aldi, other stores are available, and they're going to look at the produce that's there. And it is a minefield, because you don't know what that broccoli is. Should I buy organic? What's this? What's that? What's the other? What's your advice around that, especially when people are on a budget and they haven't got the money? Because obviously to come and work with you or me, it's private. And there might be people listening to this and going, yeah, I'd love to go and see a nutritionist, but I don't have the money. Or I'd love to buy organic, but I don't have the money. I know what I would be saying around that, because I've been through that process myself. But I'm just wondering what you say to those clients that kind of look at money as a blocker, and what the cost and the value is of that.
So the thing with organic food is, if you look at, always look at the difference, the price tags. And unfortunately, organic food can often carry a significant increase in price. Now, the fact is, if food that is not organic is not poisonous, it's been treated in some way, but in terms of the levels of chemicals that are actually in non-organic food, they are so far below any level that could be harmful. So I would not want anyone to worry that they couldn't afford to buy organic. So I just want to make that clear. If you can buy, for me, what is even better on the purse strings is if you can actually buy local. So if you can get to, if you're in somewhere that's got a local farmer's market or something in the area, because that's just going to be cheaper. It's going to be fresh. It's going to be organic without having a nice organic label on it, and it'll be cheaper. So eating seasonally is something that I try and do as much as possible. It is hard because everything is available all the time, but good rule of thumb is if something is out of season, and you can see what's in season really easily by just having a quick Google. If it's out of season, chances are it's travelled a long way. It's probably been treated in some way to keep it fresh. It's probably been picked when it's not actually been either underripe or overripe. So bottom line, don't worry if you can't buy organic, because it's, if you can easily afford it, then yeah, do it. But for me, I don't buy all organic.
I think another thing that I learned as well was when it comes to meats and things like that, is a lot of people go, you'll look at a piece of, we've got a local butcher near us now who's been amazing. We didn't have anything here, and Joe is fantastic. And actually, pound for pound is probably just as cheap. But one of the things that people need to be aware of, you might see, say a joint of pork that's however much, and then you've got your kind of, you taste the difference, or your special, it's like your organic, which is half the size. And people go, oh, well, I've got to feed the family, therefore I'm going to go for the bigger one, the cheaper, bigger one, because that's not going to feed people. But what they don't know is that a lot of that is the same amount of meat, but it's been pumped with salt and water. And actually, when you buy less but better quality, you feel more sedated, so you feel full up, and your body is absorbing that nutritionally. I think that's important for people to be aware of, isn't it? That just because there's less of it, if you buy better, your body will react to it better.
Yeah, because if you buy cheap, especially cheap chicken, and if you then cook it, you can literally see it shrink as it cooks. You end up with this quite unimpressive bit of chicken left in the pan. I think with meat, if you can buy from a butcher, great. I don't buy meat from the supermarket anymore. You will spend a bit more, but going back to the organic question, if you look at someone's full shopping list, you could easily probably make a couple of changes to that shopping list to make it no more expensive, which would enable them to buy the better quality meat. Take out a few of the bits and bobs that are being thrown in there. Everyone, you walk around the supermarket, and there's definitely ways to sort of shop smarter, I think. But with meat, I think definitely try and get as high quality as possible, and just eat it less frequently.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is get creative, isn't it? I mean, I love a one-pan wonder, but things like that, slow cookers, and if you buy decent meat, but you can, things like, lentils and beans and things like that, especially, I know they're a pain if you have to soak them for 12 hours and all the rest of it. But actually, if you look at flavor combinations, you can buy relatively cheaply. And then if you do use a slow cooker, or you do something like, you can go and pick the kids up, put it in. It just takes time. You just need to be mindful and prep and go, right, where is my time? Where am I spending my time? And again, it might be that you diary it out, because it's just getting that change, that new familiarity, isn't it? What I'd like to ask, I mean, I could talk about this forever, but if you're going to give somebody who's new to, they want to change their diet, they want to change their life, they're not feeling particularly brilliant, we're going through pretty stressful times at the moment. We've got COVID, and we've got the vaccines, and we've got all that sort of stuff out there, but we need our immune system needs to be supported, not just through drugs. We need to be using nutrition, and we already know that things like vitamin D will help the immune system. They stop flu, and all that kind of thing. If you were going to give your top tips for starting on that journey, besides getting in contact with you, which is kind of a given, but what would you up your top 5 tips on how somebody can just start those changes before they come and see you? What would you say are your top 5 tips?
Oh, top 5. Okay. So the first 2 aren't actually around food. So first one, it sounds really simple, is making sure people are drinking enough water. You'll be amazed at how many people do not do that.
Cider vinegar in it as well. I found that a little spot of apple cider vinegar. I don't know if that works.
Interesting.
But that worked for me.
So in terms of water, obviously things like decaffeinated drinks count towards water. If you're having tea and coffee, I think there's a bit of a myth that like coffee, like a cup of coffee just doesn't count at all. It does, because it is mostly water, but it is a diuretic, so it doesn't count as much. Aiming for 2 litres, evenly spaced throughout the day, is really important, and that can really help, especially it's what you mentioned before, actually, when you were talking about someone who wanted, if you wanted a cigarette, have some water. And I'm not saying for a minute people should just drink water to try and fill their stomachs, they don't feel hungry, but it's just understanding those cues, like, are you actually thirsty? So it's always good, make sure you are staying hydrated as well. The second tip is to make sure that your sleep routine is structured and consistent. And by that, I mean going to bed at the same time every single night, not just Monday to Friday. People, I remember in our 20s, we'd go to bed at 10 during the week, and then at the weekend, it'd be like 1, 2 o'clock or something stupid. But a really consistent bedtime routine, proper wind down, no screens at least an hour before bed. Make sure
I've got my blue light glasses on. I know you can't see this on the podcast.
I'm not wearing them actually. I've got my blue light glasses on. And making sure that your sleep environment is, genuinely kind of adapted to sleep. You're not watching TV just before you go to bed. For me, sleep is a hugely kind of overlooked aspect of people. The whole managing your circadian rhythm, managing your cortisol, it's literally linked to everything. So making sure that your sleep routine and, you're giving yourself a good enough sleep window to try and get at least 7 to 9 hours. Number 3 would be to follow the Eat Well plate, which people may or may not have heard of. So the Eat Well plate is a bit of a guide as to how your kind of meals should be structured in terms of carbs, protein, and fat. So half of the plate should be, think of your kind of over the ground vegetables. So anything that's great, anything that you pick. So, like your leafy greens and, carrots and all the rest of it, broccoli, cauliflower, anything like that. So half your plate should be those kind of leafy vegetables. You should then have maybe 20% as your kind of starchy. So think under the ground. So in terms of like potatoes are a bit one of those like strange vegetables that aren't really classed as a vegetable because they're very starchy. Whole grain rice, whole grain pasta. Another sort of 20% should be protein. So think meat, fish, beans, lentils, eggs. They're your main ones. Tofu if you're vegan. And then there should be a little space for your healthy fats. Now, we talked about fat before being, obviously, people think fat makes you fat. Healthy fats are absolutely vital for, so all of your hormones, every single hormone starts out as cholesterol. So testosterone, estrogen, everything, it starts out as cholesterol. Cholesterol got demonized, when people were told not to eat eggs or limit how many eggs you're having and all this rubbish. So things like olive oil, nuts and seeds, avocados, oily fish. So following, if you Google Eat Well plate, you'll get a diagram, and it might be something that people might find helpful to just stick up in the kitchen. So when they're having their meal, they've got a little bit of a reference point as to, so they're not having, like half a plate of white rice and then, a little bit of veg on the side. Tip number 4. I think I've done a lot of social media on this recently on snacking actually. So I think snacking is an area that a lot of people fall down on, and that they end up reaching for very carb heavy, a lot of these like dried fruit bars and things. So it's making sure that from a snack perspective, you're making sure that you have protein and fat with your snacks as well. So it can be easy as having, like hummus on toast with a bit of cucumber on it or something like that, rather than just having toast and marmalade, or a naked bar, which they're not the worst thing in the world, but naked bars are very, very high in sugar because they're like dried fruit. That's pretty much what they're made of.
It's the fructose, isn't it?
Yeah. Tip number 5. I think we need to go down the lifestyle route here. It's getting outside. Everyone should be getting outside, going for a walk. I'm not talking about any sort of heavy exercise, but getting outside every single day for at least half an hour. Get outside without your phone, maybe listen to music, maybe just go out and just have some peace and quiet, alone with your thoughts. I love this time of year, especially when it's really cold and clear. I absolutely love walking in this kind of weather. I find it really lifts my mood, especially people can sometimes get, seasonal affective disorder around now. It's suddenly got very dark because the hours shifted. So yeah, getting time outside and just exposing yourself to sunlight, it's just so important, just especially with people working from home, and it's really hard to consciously take those breaks. So yeah, I think they're my top 5.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through those again, just so I've heard what you said, just so that everybody else can hear it.
Yeah.
So plenty of water. I 100% would agree with that. My little tip that I would give around the water thing is every time you go to the kitchen, have a glass of water, leave the glass on the side. Or if you want to get one of those big 2-litre things and make sure you finish that by the end of the day, that's what I do.
I think
personally,
what I advocate with my clients is you can get now like 750 or 900 ml bottles, and sometimes they have some of them actually have words on the side saying you're doing great, and you can see it going down. Just make sure 2 of those every day. 2 of those.
So make it fun. I know it's only water, but make it fun. And then you said, about good sleep. Now I am with you 100% here. From a subconscious point of view, when you are asleep, that your subconscious mind is still working. That's when you are filing the day away. That is when your body is repairing. So sleep isn't just sleep. Your body is still working, but it's like stacking the shelves. It's filling the shelves back up.
30% of your brain is more active when you're asleep.
Yeah. So that I would.
It's not a waste of time. It's not unproductive time, like you say. It's absolutely mandatory. It's absolutely crucial. So
doing nothing is doing something. And then you've got the Eat Well plate, which is all about how you can balance those things out. So that's easily Googleable. You can go and have a look on Google and get that, and we'll see if we can put a link into that in the show notes. Snacking, again, you were saying about really planning that. I'm a big fan. I'll tell you this, it's a funny story. I have like nuts as my little snacks. I don't really snack that much. But one of the things that I started to do is when I switched over from chocolates to snacks is that I find nuts now taste like chocolate. I don't know if that's because I'm a hypnotherapist and I've just kind of psychologically brainwashed my palate to think that nuts are chocolate, but it works for me. So I'm just saying that. And exercise, and I think we need to be aware that exercise isn't going to the gym. And I think there's lots of studies that actually say that going for a walk burns more fat than actually going doing a massive cardio exercise, doesn't it? It's about
I mean there's quite complex things at play with exercise in terms of when you do it, if you do it on an empty stomach. And I mean exercise is more stress, so exercise is stress on the body. So people that are kind of really hammering the gym and not having rest days, it can actually be counterproductive, and that's a whole different area. But I think for me it's movement. I like to use both movement rather than exercise.
I love that.
Yourself moving around the house, just all the thing. And especially, like I say, when you're a mum, you're constantly running around.
And get the kids involved. And I think that's another thing, isn't it? You can make play into exercise and movement. So use your kids to get involved with that. Get on the floor with them. How can you blend that in? It's not about separating. It's how can I bring these into my routine is what it is. That's amazing. Now I've got one last question. We ask this to every single guest. Okay. And this everybody goes, oh my God, I don't know. So you thought the top tips were bad. This is the last thing. So we always ask people, what is this doesn't have to be around nutrition. What is your go-to phrase? So what is that thing that you say that either motivates you or inspires you, whether that be food related, whether that be in your business, whatever it is, what would you say? What's your favorite go-to phrase and why?
Oh, this is a tough one.
I know it's always a toughie. That's why we do it. And that's why we do it at the end.
I don't know if it's necessarily a phrase that I kind of have in my head that I use a lot, but I think you have the tools and you are in control of your own health. I know that sounds a bit, it's not very, very inspirational.
No, I like that though. Actually, I think that's empowering, because what that's saying to people is you do have the choice to do that.
Absolutely.
I actually think, can you just say that again? Because I think that's, I do like that. I was looking for some
you have the tools and you are in control of your own health.
Yeah, you are. And I think when we
100% believe that for everybody.
And I think when we talk about tools, I think the other thing that we need to do is also to recognize that there are people out there. So if you know somebody who is maybe, wants to find out a little bit more how to live healthy, especially if they're a mum, especially if, they're feeling all of this pressure that's on them, share this podcast, let people know that Lucy is around and that she can help people like that. I certainly can help with that. And one of the things that we've been certainly talking about is whether we can do some collaboration about supporting the mind-body connection. You're a psychologist, but that's what I do. And we know that it's not just about the food. We know that it's not just about the exercise. it's that lifestyle change, isn't it? It's everything. It's mind, body, soul, spirit. And it's about finding those people who are the professionals that are passionate about what they do, because there is so much out there. And again, if you're in the Cheshire area, you're Wilmslow based.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So if you're kind of South Cheshire, get in contact. But I guess you do stuff through Zoom as well.
Yes. Yeah. I see clients at a gym in Alderley Edge, and I see people on Zoom as well.
Yeah. So there you go. There's zero excuses to just make that contact, have a chat, and if it's not right for you right now, then that's fine. But just the top tips that you've given.
I offer a free 30-minute call with anybody who wants to talk through what it is that they're trying to work on. So that's just part of it.
And sometimes that's the hardest thing, isn't it? It's that fear of going, will I be judged? Is this person going to try and sell me stuff? And I just want to say this to anybody who's listening to this podcast. Anybody that you speak to, whether it's a nutrition coach, whether it's a mind coach, whether it be a fitness coach, the ones that have your best interests at heart are the ones that want you to be successful. And any money you pay is an investment in you. And I think any good coach will say that. You're not paying that coach, you're paying yourself. And that energy that you put in money will come back to you in knowledge, and that knowledge that you will get will then go back in. So it's that cycle of positive energy. So yeah, be careful of the people that are selling you the dream. Go to the people that are going to be honest and truthful, but they're going to guide you through that process lovingly. I always say to my clients, I'll kick your ass, but I'll do it with a soft slipper on.
Yeah.
That's the way that I say it. so those are the kind, and also the other, I don't know if you do this, but one of the things that I always say is ask your coach, what are you working on? What are your challenges at the moment? Just going back to that vulnerability thing, because a good coach is always learning, and a good therapist is always learning. We haven't got it all figured out. Nobody's an expert on this. Nope. But Lucy, thank you so much for taking the time to do the podcast. I'm sure we'll connect again, and maybe if we get another subject, we'll do another one, because it's really, really good to
I'd love that. And thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Marcus. Really appreciate it.
We're going to put everything in the show notes. We're going to how you can connect with Lucy. But very quickly, Lucy, you're on social media. So if people are listening to this, how can they find you?
I'm on Instagram under Lucy P Nutrition. I'm on Facebook, Lucy Patel Nutrition, and my website is www.lucypatelnutrition.co.uk.
Awesome. Thank you very much for this amazing chat. And I could go on forever, but we need to stop it.
We'll do another one.
We'll do another one. So thank you, everybody. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you can do your bit to help somebody else out there who might be struggling by giving this a share, giving this a like. Contact us, either myself or Lucy, if you want to find out more. And we hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time on the Talking Minds podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, why don't you come and join us at facebook.com/talking_minds. And don't forget to give us a little like. Thanks very much for listening. See you soon.